This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We both lost babies to SIDS in winter 2021.
In the throes of grief, I reached out to a stranger on the internet and our friendship was born.
In the years since, we've been working hard to survive, rebuild, and navigate the continual challenges that have come our way, including divorce,
Job loss,
dating while bereaved,
moving multiple times,
health scares,
pregnancy and parenting a living child,
starting new jobs, and so much more.
We are tired.
Happily ever after is out of the question for us, but this podcast documents our journeys to happier ever after because we believe life after loss is worth living.
So join us as we laugh, cry until we laugh.
Welcome to As Long as I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here. Here I am. I'm wearing a headband because I haven't washed my hair in a few days.
Oh, I haven't washed my hair either, and I went for 2 runs. My hair is
Today?
disgusting.
Or since you washed your hair last?
Since I last washed my hair.
Oh. I was like, that's very fit.
I know. I'm so fit. Sorry. Okay, so what are we recording today? I have a lot of episode ideas sitting in the queue here. Should we just record some regular episodes as opposed to?
I'm distracted, so I don't think I'll be able to think about other things.
A topic. Yeah. All right, I'll just read the topics in case one feels like something we want to talk about, but maybe not. Okay. What did society get wrong about grief? The bottom revisited.
Which is an interesting idea.
Very interesting. Time heals all wounds. Discussion of ways things have gotten easier versus how things have gotten harder. How do you manage anxiety when the worst has happened? So an episode all about anxiety. EMDR follow-up for you. You're So Brave, You're So Strong revisited. The Loose Threads episode about daydreams that didn't come to fruition.
Well, we could talk about that.
Yeah, no kidding. That's not a bad one for today, maybe. You know, Judith, I'm tired.
Alina, I'm not even tired. I'm beyond. Tired is for humans. Tired is for mortals, and we're done with that.
I feel like I can't catch my breath. I was literally listening everything going on in my life today to my therapist, and she was really validating that this is all really hard and I have a lot going on and anybody would be overwhelmed with all this. And then I was like, and I have a dead kid.
Yeah.
That wasn't even on my list, but it's also this layer of shit on top of everything else.
It's the humming in the background.
It's the humming in the background, and sometimes it feels like a screaming in the background, but sometimes it's just a hum. I feel like both of us are really not in the best place right now.
I think we're both in really bad places, honestly. I think we're in bad places. I feel like last week or 2 weeks ago when you were having this egg retrieval, and I called you to talk about it, and I was in a really good place and you were in a really bad place. It was almost hard for me to reach you. It was hard to reach because you physically weren't answering the phone, but it was also hard to reach you in your place from where I was. So I feel like now that I have joined you in the bottom again, and I can talk about that in a second, but in some ways it feels like I feel like just I would have been annoyed with the me of last week.
Which I was.
Yeah.
I was like, stop being so optimistic.
Yeah.
Right?
I would be annoyed with the me of last week a lot. And so this is my apology to you from last week me. I also feel like when I get bad news, again, we can talk about it in a second, but when I get really bad news, I tend to I've spoken about this before, curl in. And I don't like to talk to people. And I kind of sensed when I was on the phone with you that you were curling in.
Yeah.
And from the spot I was in, you just felt so far away, you know?
Yeah. Oh, believe me, I know. I felt that too.
Yeah, you were just so far away. So I guess I just feel like now that I've rejoined you.
Hi, welcome to the bottom.
Hi. Hello, old friend.
Hello.
Hello. Are we? Yeah, that's better. Hello, old friend. And
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I don't even know if I'm making any sense, but let's just kind of get into it. So we're
Yeah.
talking today about daydreams, which I think is actually like a really apt conversation to have about. Because I know that many of you know that my husband got a new job and things were really looking up for a few weeks there, and I really felt like we were like turning a page, and I was like annoyed about the car. And then last night my husband suddenly got let go, and you might be thinking to yourself like, wow, I've never heard of somebody who's had so much turmoil. Like, this man must be a real piece of work. And I just want to, like, if you met him, you'd be like, this is like the loveliest, like most normal. Like, he is like,
It's true. I can vouch for him. He's actually a really wonderful person.
He's like a really like lovely, like normal person. Like, he doesn't like, he's not the type of person that you like kind of come away meeting them being like, well, that person's got the shit all over the place. Like, that's just not who he is. I think that my personality is like, let's do this and let's do this and let's flake on that. Like, I'm a very unreliable person, I think. And when it comes to like making plans or being in one place or being consistent, he's like incredibly consistent with things. And he's a lot more just like comfortable being like for me, I get so bored if I was in the same job for years. Like, part of the reason I love my job is because I'm constantly switching projects. Like, he's someone who like craves stability. So it's even more painful that he got let go. And the reasons he got let go were like so out of his control and so dumb. And he like are not a reflection of him at all, just a reflection of like the company's needs. And so we are back where we were.
Back in the washing machine.
Back in the washing machine.
You had 7 weeks of relief.
I had 7 weeks of relief, and the reason I want to talk about daydreams is because I had told you that on Friday we had a meeting with like a mortgage person. I don't know what their title was, mortgage in chief, where we were trying to figure out like how much we would need to save every month to buy a house and what are the financial needs that we will need to get a house. And like that conversation almost feels laughable because that like the idea of like us having a house and being stable and staying in one place and consistency was a dream. And it was
so close.
Felt like I could almost taste it. I felt I was so close, and now it feels so far. So I guess let's talk a little bit about dreams, like daydreams we're talking about, not daydreams. And like, do you allow yourself to have them? What do they look like for you these days? And how do we cope with the fact that like we're not quite.
They feel all of my daydreams feel very unachievable right now.
Very unachievable.
And they feel it feels out of, the path to getting there feels very out of my control, which is not a good place to be.
Yeah. I very rare, like this is what's so crazy after the loss. I don't really let myself have that many. And we've even spoken about like the first time we daydreamed was a year ago when we were on our grief retreat. And it felt like these past 7 weeks, I could see myself doing it, like imagining like when I want to start having more children or buying a house, or I had this like fantasy that for our 10-year wedding anniversary, we were going to go to Cancun, which I'm not Cancun, like lower than Cancun, because Cancun's like a little hotel-y, but like a little bit out of the way of Cancun. Like I had this whole plan that for Aiden's death anniversary, we were going to go for the week to celebrate our 10th anniversary and to be with Aiden to the beach in Cancun. Not Cancun, but equivalent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I had this whole fantasy. Like in my head, I was like booking things and planning things and imagining, are we going to stay at an Airbnb or all inclusive? Or are we going to, like, I was dreaming. I was dreaming about a vacation.
Mm-hmm. And now there's just this loose thread of a daydream that is never going to get sewn into the fabric of your life.
So, first of all, like, were you always someone who daydreamed? How does daydreaming, like, I don't want to say like daydreaming. I almost want to call it like having dreams for your future. Like, is that what you would call it?
It's not daydreaming. It's dreaming.
Like fantasizing. It's almost like a fantasy.
Like planning. Yeah, fantasizing. Yeah. I think that has always been a thing for me. I have a very like active mind, and I'm constantly thinking about future scenarios and working on like what would make me feel good this time next year. Like I've always been very like future and planning oriented and focused, and I've always been, I was going to say a daydreamer, but a daydreamer gives the connotation of someone who's like spacey, like space cadet, and that's not what it was. But it was just like, I was just someone who had a really clear vision of what their future looked like. Like I always have, always. And then, my son died and my marriage ended. And so for a while it was kind of like nothing. Like I wasn't daydreaming at all. And actually, let me even back up. Like when I was pregnant with Quinn, it was the pandemic, had just started, and I was really stressed out about that and scared and unsure. And I just had this, and I was pregnant, and when you're pregnant, you're stressed anyway. And so I just had this like visualization that I would do that would really calm me, where I would picture myself sitting in our living room, our new living room, because again, like we were moving houses and all this stuff, our new living room in front of the fire, nursing this baby that I was pregnant with at Christmas. And I just like really like, I thought about it all the time. It was like a very calming, meditative almost vision. And I really held on to that. And then at some point that materialized, right? Like I had this baby at Christmas time. My life hadn't completely fallen apart. And so, and that was a super realistic, specific, but realistic vision. And now I just find myself struggling to get to a point where I can do that again, because my life is so uncertain. Like for a long time, and if you guys are longtime listeners of the podcast, you remember all the way back in episode 3, it was called The Audacity of Hope, and I talked about how I, since the loss, have become almost more optimistic, that even without any basis in reality, I was so sure I was going to have more children. And now I'm just sitting here with a failed IVF cycle under my belt. And it's unclear whether we even should be pursuing IVF at all. I have doctors telling me different things. And I'm just like, I don't know what the shape of my future looks like. Like, I don't know what shape the room is. So like, how can I decorate the room with a daydream? I can't. Makes me sad.
Yeah. I think part of it is that you have to be able to do it, you have to be in a relaxed state. I think, like, I think, if your brain is constantly focused on a task ahead, if your brain is constantly focused on working or building, I don't know what, there's no time or space to have any extra thoughts. And in order to really fantasize, you need to have space and time to have these like extra thoughts and imagination and dreams. And I think for a long time, my brain was completely preoccupied by grief, and there was no space for that. There was no time and no space. And then I had another baby, and I had it was hell, and I was dealing with a lot, and I was dealing with PTSD, and my husband was having PTSD, and there was no space. There was no time for me to dream. There was no world. There were like practical concerns, like as if like I genuinely don't know if this baby's gonna live. I can't imagine having a living baby, so I couldn't imagine the fantasy you're describing at Christmas, because with my second, I didn't believe that was gonna happen. There was like also part of it is like we were moving a lot, so I didn't know where I was gonna live. I couldn't have a fantasy of a house, of not even a house, just somewhere to live, because we were moving around so much. And then I couldn't have a fantasy for the year ahead because our financial uncertainties. It feels like it's impossible. In order to have fantasy, it almost has to be like somehow based in reality. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, otherwise it's just insane. It's just like insanity.
Otherwise, I don't think it brings the comfort that a fantasy or a dream does. So it's like, yeah, I could sit here and fantasize that I lived in a jungle, but I don't think that would give me the comfort that I'm looking for. Like the purpose of like fantasizing and is visualizing your goals, I think. Like, and then once you can see it, then you can set a path to it.
Exactly. Like if we were sitting here fantasizing that, Quinn and Aiden were actually alive, like that's a totally different thing than what we're talking about right now. We're talking about like looking into an actual legitimate possible future and trying to build something that we want.
Yeah.
And it's like, why am I even doing that? Like everything's getting all knocked down all the time, and I keep trying and I keep getting disappointed.
And it almost hurts the fact that we had this amazing meeting with like the mortgage person hurts almost more. You know, it's like I wish I never dreamed. I wish I never dreamed. Because now you've lost the reality, but you've also lost this like potential reality. Like you've lost that dream too. So now you're like losing in the current and in the future. It's like more compounded losses to manage.
Yeah. Like I because I was such a, again, I'm using the word daydreamer, but because I was such a daydreamer, like there's so many futures that I've lost that I had pictured really clearly. Like another good example was when Kaylee and I bought our house, I pictured like years and years of our kids. Like we had this like staircase that, you know, I was picturing them like coming down the staircase at Christmas and like peering over the railing and looking at the presents under the Christmas tree. And like, so that's a thing I had pictured really clearly. And like, that's not going to happen. That house is gone. That marriage is over.
So you've lost Quinn and you've lost that.
I lost Quinn and I lost that future where Quinn and his little brothers and sisters are running down the stairs to get their Christmas presents. Like, it's just a loose thread. Like, and there's all these loose threads everywhere, all these daydreams that I just like pictured and they're just, they're never going to happen. And I want them so bad. This is not like I dreamed about being an astronaut when I was 5 and then realized I didn't want to be an astronaut and I let it go. Like, I still want all these things. I still want them. I still wish I could daydream about them, but it just doesn't feel safe.
It doesn't feel safe.
Because I think your point is right. Like, the more you daydream, the more you're losing when it doesn't happen. If you don't daydream at all, then you're not disappointed. Because you didn't have a different, like, it's the expectation versus the reality. When you don't have an expectation, then whatever reality is whatever reality is, you deal with it. But when it's so mismatched to your expectations, it's sad.
And honestly, these days I assume reality is bad. Like I assume that reality is hard. I think also another thing I'm really struggling with is that it takes a lot of mental energy to tell yourself when you're in the good times to be like, Judith, this time is different. Don't let your anxiety speak to you. My husband was saying to me, he was like, I was anxious that like, you know, maybe the work product that I was doing was like, I don't know, maybe I made a typo or something dumb like that. He was like, I was anxious about A, B, C, and I never considered Z. Like this is like crazy out of left field. Now, not only does he need to be anxious about A, B, and C, but he also needs to be anxious about X, Y, and Z. There's more to be anxious about. So it's like beforehand, I was telling myself, Judith, don't feed into these anxieties. What if everything turns out okay? Okay, that's something we always say. Like, and what if everything turns out okay? But when you have constant reminders that things aren't going to turn out okay, when freak accidents or just like weird coincidences or things that just make no sense happen over and over and over and over again, it's like, why there is no imagination for me to dream of because that is just never going to be my reality. I, for some reason, am in the 1% always. And I don't know why I'm in the 1% always, but it feels like I'm in that 1% of people who get fucked always. So I can't answer to my anxiety. And then the anxiety grows. It's like we empower the anxiety. The more bad things happen, the more we feed the anxiety grows and it's harder to manage. Yeah. And so instead of like, those reassuring statements, they no longer apply.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. It's true. Like the evidence that we have is that stuff doesn't work out.
Alina, there was a piece of me this morning when I was on the metro that I was thinking to myself, like, maybe we shouldn't have a podcast because maybe the story is too interesting. Like, maybe we, like, I don't know. Like, not that the story is too interesting. I'm just saying, like, maybe, like, we've jinxed the universe into being like, they need something to tell.
They need more content.
They need more. Which is not how we feel at all. But, I mean, like, that's the irrational thought I was thinking. It's like, maybe I just don't know what it could be that why me, like, why does this keep happening? It's like, I don't know.
And I just think all the time, like, what we want is not that unusual. So many people have these really simple things that you and I want. We just want an alive family in a place that we call home. It's not that complicated. We are not asking for like the sun, moon, and stars here. This is what most people have. And I know everybody has problems. I know that. But it's like, I have problems and I have a dead kid and I can't get pregnant. And you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
I guess I'm feeling a little bit why me today.
I feel a little hopeless also.
Yeah, I definitely feel hopeless.
I'm feeling very hopeless. It just feels like some people just aren't destined for it. And maybe you're just not destined for it. And then when I think that, just to go back to our topic today, I'm just like, so why even try? Why even imagine? Why even hope? Like I had this visual, like when it all kind of came out, I have this visual of like myself just like putting on my robe and climbing into the washing machine and be like, oh, this is my spot. Like move over, back. Like saying hi to the machine and being like, hi, honey, and nice to see you here. I'm back. Let's go. What are we on? Gentle cycle. Okay, let's go, Judith. I had like this weird visual of me like crawling into the washing machine, cozying up into this spot in my robe, just being, let's go. Let's see what happens next. And then I kind of like imagine the washing machine being like, oh, this little bitch again. Like, she's so heavy.
I don't want to be in the washing machine.
I want to be in the washing machine. But on the other hand, like I do tell myself, and again, guys, I think we might have veered from the topic, but whatever. I do tell myself I had hoped for the first 6 months of this year, this calendar year, the entire time I was like, I need a break. I need a break. I need a break. I need a break. I need to catch my breath. And then the universe or God, whatever you believe in, gave me 7 weeks of a break and 7 weeks to catch my breath. 7 weeks of, I'm not saying everything was perfect, like, but like normal problems. 7 weeks where I felt like a normal person with normal problems, where I would call my best friend and say like, oh, my kid is sick and she's not sleeping and I'm tired and my husband's tired and we're all tired and she's teething and all, you know, I had 7 weeks and then crashing back down. And part of me feels like, Judith, like you got your break. Like, this is what you asked for. This is what you asked for. Would you rather this not happened at all? Like I do ask my, like, would you rather not have this time? I ask myself that.
Would you rather?
No, I'm so glad I had this time. I'm
Yeah.
so glad I had this time.
I was going to say, yeah.
I'm so glad I had this time. I think it was just really important for me to remember that life can be normal. I mean, if not for me, but like even just a taste of it was like good because like I said, I was living in my dream world, my fantasy world for 7 weeks. I lived there and it was just as good as I thought it was going to be. It tasted just as sweet as I imagined. So yeah, so that's what I got. And now I'm back in this spot. And I feel a little bit like with egg on my face. I feel like I'm dumb to have dreamed.
I hate that we're sitting here like, why even bother daydreaming? What a sad statement, but that's how I feel. That's how I feel. Why bother? It's not going to work out the way I want it to. So why even bother thinking about how I want it to work out? And I guess on the flip side, people, annoying people would be like, if you don't, think about it, then how can you make it happen? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, manifest. Like, are we manifesting this? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I didn't manifest a completely failed IVF egg retrieval. That's not what I want. This episode is a bummer. Continuing with the clothes metaphor, the loose threads. You got your loose threads on all your clothes and you're getting put in the washing machine. And the loose threads are just getting ripped off and they're all sitting in the lint catcher. And it's a real bummer. All of our dreams are sitting in the fucking lint catcher.
That's where they are, turning to like a gray mush that might light on fire.
Exactly.
That's where they are.
Oh my God.
That's where they are.
Because I'm in such a bad place, I was like, oh my God, like I should make sure my lint trap is empty because I don't want my apartment to burn down.
I know.
Like that's like the place I'm in mentally right now.
Yeah.
Is I'm like, oh, houses burn down. I bet my house is going to burn down. That's probably going to happen because that's the way my life goes is my house burns down.
One thing I'll say is about like going back into the washing machine when you've been living there for 2.5 years is that I definitely feel like a little bit more equipped. Like I feel a little bit more resilient. Like I knew exactly what to do. I canceled the cleaning lady. I got back on my insurance. Like I called I emailed my boss and whatever, and I got right back on my family on my insurance, and I just like, you know what to do. What needs to get done. And then I was like, okay, like, what are we cutting back on? Like, you just like, you now know what to do. And like, I wish I was at the part where I was like, okay, just let yourself grieve and comfort yourself. Like, I'm not even at the grieving and the comforting part of myself, like, part. I'm just at the like shock part. And I almost feel like, yeah, so that's hard. And I just want to say this now, which is that I did have a slight heads up that this was going to happen because I did meet an astrologer. And the astrologer told me, I met with this astrologer in the spring, and she told me, well, your husband's going to get a job starting June 11th. And I was like, at that time, I was like, there's just no freaking way. Like, there's just no way. And then he did. But the lady had told me, she was like, yeah, she did. June 12th, he started. But the lady had told me that that we're going to move, and that he's not going to have like a permanent placement until January. And I had thought that maybe it meant like a promotion. And I just didn't, sometimes you hear these astrologers and you put a lot of stock into it, and it's like, it's bullshit. But this lady's actually really accurate, but that's not the point. The point is, like, there was a little piece of me that had heard that.
I mean, literally, we were talking about this yesterday, and we were like, well, that's what the astrologer said.
Yeah, that's what the astrologer said. And there's a piece of me that's like, well, the astrologer said that in January he would have something that would be permanent. So, like, do I feel comforted by the knowledge that that maybe there's something, right? That maybe there's something in the January. Like, do I just tell myself, okay, well, it's just a few more months, just push up your dreams till January. That's not a big deal. Like, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like never again. It just feels like there is no path forward. This is done. You're done. That's how it feels.
This is actually something I was talking about in therapy today, like 2 hours ago, is I feel like what's so hard about all of this is, like, if we knew eventually with certainty that this was going to work out, if we knew for a fact your husband was going to get a permanent job in January, and he'd flounder in the meantime, and he'd have a hard time with whatever, and he'd be stressed and money would be tight and all that, but you knew he would get a job in January, like, this would be so much more bearable. If I knew, like, maybe it's going to take me 8 months to get a good embryo, but the first transfer is going to work, and I'll have a baby in my arms this time, a year and a half from now, like, that would be so much more tolerable. But we're sitting here, and there's a legitimate possibility, not a high possibility, but it's theoretically conceivable that I'll never have another biological child, and that your husband will never have a stable job, right? And so we're sitting here, and it's really just fear that outcome is still possible right now because things aren't settled. And so it feels like we just have all this experience where the bad outcome is the one that we get. And so we're sitting here trying to tell ourselves that, like, maybe next time it's going to be better, like, go ahead and daydream. And then we just wind up with another daydream loose thread again. I feel very just afraid. Like, I look at my life and I'm afraid, which is, like, not fun.
I'm very afraid. I hear that. I agree with that. That if we knew for certain everything was going to work out.
Even if it was hard in the meantime.
Would I feel reassured? And there's part of me that's like, yeah. But there's also a part of me that's like, and I've been through a lot. And I don't want one more day. So, yeah, I know that it'll work out. But in the meantime, this is a lot for me. One more day. Yeah. What did you say Taylor Swift said?
Oh, yeah. It only hurts this much right now is what I've been saying the whole time.
Yeah. When you told me that last night, that really resonated with me.
It only hurts this much right now is what I've been saying the whole time.
I also want to add that, like, I've been surprised at how I've been reacting. Because
I think you're a little in shock.
I'm 100% in shock. But even beyond that, like, this morning I woke up and I was, like, obsessed with cleaning, which I am not. That's not my personality. But, like, I was like, I just need to keep my mind busy. Which I find is, like, a tactic that I used when I got dumped in high school. and like my feelings for her. You know, like it's not really a tactic I use or believe in, but I think that's the opposite of dreaming. I think that's the opposite of a daydream. That's an opposite of a fantasy, is filling your mind with just immediate action to preoccupy it so you have no additional space.
Yeah.
It's like if you think of fantasies as only being able to exist with the space, extra space, then the opposite of that is saying you don't deserve fantasies. So I'm going to, as a method of controlling your hopes, I'm going to fill your brain. It's like a way to control your dreams. Does that make any sense? I think that makes sense. You're trying to control your dreams.
I mean, because the human spirit is one that wants to daydream and it wants to have hope. And we keep getting bitten in the ass. Every time we daydream, we get bit in the ass.
So how have you been dealing with it? Like,
Oh, not well.
Yeah.
Not well. I've been kind of hibernating the last week, which is what I do. I don't know. It's really hard for me. I mean, one thing I decided, and I can't even believe I'm saying this, is that I'm going to postpone my next IVF cycle. It just feels like I know I'm not going to get enough embryos before this test expires in October. And by the way, go back and listen to the eggs on my face episode if you want to figure out what the hell I'm talking about. But there's no way that I'm going to get enough embryos before this test expires. And so it just feels like to force myself to do a cycle at a time that's a really bad time for me personally is something I tried already at the wedding and it was not worth it. And so I'm not going to do it again.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't know. Is this episode about anxiety? Is this episode about daydreaming? Is this episode about the washing machine? I don't know. I don't even know what to call it.
I don't know either. But what I will say is this morning I was up at 7 a.m. with stainless steel cleaner. And I took toothpicks and I wiped the dirt from the corners of the outside of our windows.
Oh my gosh. That is such an insight into your psyche right now.
In case anyone is wondering what I was up to this morning. And
so in other words, you're doing great mentally.
I'm doing great mentally. And to be honest, like it's complicated because at the end of the day, actually the person who's really suffering is my husband because this hurt him so much. His spirit was so in this job and his heart's been crushed so much recently that like he just was so full of hope and all in, and whatever I'm feeling, he's feeling times 10. And part of what I manage and part of what's overwhelming for me and just part of what's being a spouse is that like my shit has to also make a lot of space for his shit. You know, I have to put my shit aside. Not always, you know, it's a marriage, but right now it does. Right. So I know we're having this conversation, but I think there's a piece of me that needs to like, when I'm done with this conversation, put my head back on my shoulders, go downstairs and try my best to be not optimistic because I don't think that that's helpful, but try my best to be like a vessel to like hold his, you know, it's not about me, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Right. It affects you, but it's not about you.
It affects me, but it's not about me. Yes. It affects me, but it's not about me. And I just want to say one more thing. I don't know where we are in this, but I just want to say one more thing, which is that like last night when we were processing this, the beginning of processing this, which has been, I was shocked at how immediately I was thrown back into, no, I don't feel the way I did about the loss. Like obviously Aiden's loss was like massively huge, but like I recognize so much of the process on a smaller scale.
Yes.
So like I was like, okay, now I can see I'm in shock. And here's the part where we like talk about, I don't know, like practical concerns. And here's the part where we're like, well, how are we going to tell people?
And here's the part where my brain is trying to reconcile. And so I'm sitting here and I'm thinking and I'm like, oh, what about this? Oh, no, wait, that's not going to work. Oh, what about this? Oh, no, that's going to work.
Or here's the part where I'm trying to even like negotiate as if like exactly. I could go to my husband's job and be like, oh, but could we just have a couple more days? or even this morning when I was like, oh, I got 7 great weeks. And I was like, oh, like, it would have been amazing if I had 8. It would have been amazing if I had 9. I would do anything for 9. Like I'm bargaining for time loss, you know, like I was sitting there like recognizing a lot of these patterns in myself.
And I love that you pointed that out, because I've totally been doing that too with the IVF thing. Like, I really feel like this failed IVF cycle was like its own fresh, brand new loss and grief.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here like only just now beginning to realize that that is what it is. And that's why I feel so shitty, is that I'm actually acutely grieving something. And I have a lot of experience grieving. And so now that I know I'm grieving, I actually think it's a little bit easier to deal with.
I think so.
Because I have tools for grieving.
It's not even that, because I'm not really quite employing those yet, but I think at least you feel less out of control, because you're like, this is a normal thought process. Oh, I recognize this. This feels familiar. Yes, I know that this stage is going to pass and give way to that stage. Then you're in that stage and you're like, yes, that stage. Got it. I feel the stage. I get it. Okay, I know another one's coming. I know I'm like, for example, like I haven't cried yet about it. You know, like, because there's a lot of reasons why. Part of me is like, Judith, this is dumb. You're healthy. You've got a live child now. Like, you're in a different place. This is not the same. This is nothing to cry about. And then there's like a piece of me that knows, like, I didn't sit there crying all day when Aiden died either. Like, there's you know, like that. Like, give it time. You will. And then like, there's just like, and even small things, like I have that, you know, weighted teddy bear that when I'm grieving, I hold on to, and like it just feels comforting to hold on to my heart. And like I was sleeping with it last night, because like it just makes me feel like, I don't know why. It's something I do when I'm grieving. Like, it's something I do when I'm holding on. And another thing I want to add is just like how much we've spoken about this a lot, especially when I was talking about the dumb fucking car, but about how it feels like Aiden's loss like continues to cast a long shadow. To me, this, even though, again, like from his company, who's just making like a decision about the direction of how they want to, whatever,
structure their teams or whatever.
They don't think about that. Obviously, I don't think they even know about Aiden. But like for me, it's like, okay, but if Aiden wouldn't have died, we would not be in this position. And I can tell you 500 reasons why. And so then I find myself like getting angry with Aiden for dying, or angry at the universe for killing him. I go back and forth about the two. But then I'm kind of like, again, I'm still dealing with this. Like, I'm still sitting here like 2.5 years later, dealing with the consequences of that loss. I can't break free. I fixed the car situation. I thought that was behind us. Like, I cannot break free of this grip that his loss has on me. And I just desperately want to move forward.
Yeah.
I want to be able to say that my husband lost his job and it didn't make me think of my dead son. You know, like I want to be, I want to like hate whoever's president. I want to be like annoyed at like the tech. I don't know what I want to be annoyed at. But my point is like right now, it's like something bad happens. And because of the way it shakes out, like I get angry and frustrated with my son's death. It just feels like an extension. It feels like I'm continuously being plagued by his death. And it will not let me move on. It will not let me.
Mm-mm. Yes. I really feel the same way. I have one other thing to add too, which is, my husband and I have bought this new house. We're closing in a couple weeks, and I've been working on like floor plans and like figuring out what we're going to do for renovations, which I guess is like scratching a little bit of that daydreaming itch. However, I actually think this is like really appropriate to talk about in this episode. Judith, I sent you the floor plans and you were like, oh, that'll be like such a cute nursery. Like that'll be that's the perfect size for nursery. Or, oh, that could totally be like a playroom. Like when you have kids who have toys and their toys will be everywhere.
Actually, what happened was, I just want to tell this real story, which is Alina sent me her layout or whatever that she'd probably worked really hard on. I put a lot of thought into it, and I was like, Alina, this is not going to work for kids.
I have some new ones, by the way, that I want to show you.
Please send them to me. I ripped it apart. I butchered it. I was like, this is not going to work for children. Let me tell you why. I mean, not that she doesn't know, but she isn't allowing herself to think about that.
Yes.
I was like, you cannot have a playroom and not have it visible from the kitchen.
I was like, well, Judith, like for resale, like if we have to sell this house, like this needs to also be able to be repurposed as a dining room. And you were like, but you're going to use it as a playroom. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to use it as a playroom. I might give birth to a baby and then the baby will die and I'll have to move out of the house in a tizzy. Like
I know. I know. It was such a funny conversation.
And it was just like it was such a funny conversation because we were just like on such different pages. And you were coming at it like very reasonably given my goals for my life. You were like, that's going to be a playroom. Like, so make sure you can see it from the kitchen. And I was like, I can't let myself think about it as a playroom because that breaks my heart. Because what if I don't have kids and then I have this like phantom loose thread playroom here, you know? I think actually what I said was, it's like I'm going to be walking around this house seeing all the ghosts of these babies who don't exist.
That's exactly what you said.
The one who did exist and died, and these ones that have never yet existed, but they, you know, I want them to exist so badly and they exist in my heart and they're just not there.
One thing we should just add, like I know we're getting on 43 minutes here, but we should probably talk about the conversation we had the other day, just because I think it's interesting and we've lost sight of our whatever we were talking about, daydreams, about when you were telling me like how bad everything was. And I said, I wouldn't trade. I don't want your life. And you were like, I wouldn't trade with you either. I don't want your life.
Neither of us wants the other's life. It's true.
Neither of us want each other's life, which I find so entertaining.
Like I obviously am jealous that you have a living child. I can tell she brings you so much joy. Like I would give anything to have a living child of my own, but like you've got your own shit. You're over there like looking at me and like you're like, wow, I don't want to not to have such uncertainty about having a family, but Alina has this like, you know, functional husband who's like whatever, like, and a new house, like she's buying a house and like both of us just like the stuff we desperately want the other one has. Actually,
I think we should get married. And then I could help build your house and live in your fantasy, and then you could help me raise my kid.
She's sparkly.
She sparkles. I assume everyone thinks their kid sparkles, whether or not this kid actually does.
They're wrong.
But my point is just that, like, we have what each other wants. So I think we should just get married and live in our fantasy world. To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow. Yay!